Everyone, can everyone hear me? No, a lot of you have been waiting for this wonderful moment also. And we're going to have a very interesting discussion and questions. So if I can please ask everyone's attention. Thank you so much. And again, I would like to introduce our famous friend, author, explorer, marine biologist, oceanographer, lecturer, the world-renowned Her Deepness, Sylvia Earle. Thank you so much, Sylvia.
And who are you?
And I'm Daniel Caceres. I'm the regional representative for Sustainable Ocean Alliance in Hispanoamerica. Okay, Sylvia, I wanted to make this a very interesting questions for you, specifically about the role of the youth. We have a very important period now of our times, and I think not only do we have to form ourselves, but we also have to question the narratives that have been told to us. And I want to start with this first question. Like, they usually tell us in science that we have to be very neutral. That in science, we should not take sides, but we should be neutral with our data, with our publication, and that should be just it. But then, for example, in Peru, for more than 100 years, we've had a career. The only ocean science career that was there was focused on fisheries. The only ocean science career in there was focused on extractivism around the country. And just recently, the conservation discussion has started to come into play. So what would you tell to young scientists from here that are trying to have neutral approaches to conservation? What would you tell them?
Just tell the truth. That's what scientists try to do. But the truth sounds radical in a way, because we know things now that no one could know when I was a child. So we have new ways of understanding, but it's based on evidence. It's based on knowledge. We're not making this up. If scientists just shared what they know, you don't have to exaggerate. In fact, you shouldn't exaggerate. It's just, we're in trouble. The planet is in a state of overall decline of habitability from our standpoint. Now, there are probably some organisms that like the changes that are happening. There are probably some bacteria out there and some other creatures that say, oh, my time has come. The ocean has acidified. I like it this way. But that would bring about changes that would not be favorable for us, for example. You don't have to go beyond the truth. And I understand what you're saying, that sometimes engaging the public, not just your fellow scientists, seems as if you're reaching out beyond your little circle. But imagine if astronauts came back from high in the sky with their unique perspective and just kept all the information to themselves. Don't tell anybody what Earth looks like from space. Suppose all the information gathered by satellites was just locked away in scientific, institutions somewhere. If it weren't shared with the news we get about hurricanes are coming, the knowledge, the information. This is not radical. This is just sharing the nature of what's happening. It's unprecedented. We're witnessing change of geological scale in the span of one lifetime, my lifetime. We have seen on the land the loss of forests, the loss of wildlife, the changes in the atmosphere, the changes in freshwater, the changes in the ocean. But the ocean has been less obvious. You can say, overall, that about half of the coral reefs are gone. It's just true. You're not making this up. That's not radical. You can say about half the kelp forests are gone from just a few decades ago. Since the 1980s, that was not that long ago. It's within the lifetime of your parents, your grandparents. It's within my lifetime. 90% of the sharks are gone. Come on, that's not radical. It is radical, but it's the truth. You're not making this up. You're not telling a story. You're telling something that concerns you. Why should you stay quiet about things that concern your future? You must just do what you have to do to protect what you love, which is your life.
Thank you so much, Sylvia. And I really like that you mentioned the word radical first, because that's a word that usually comes into term when young people take action for what they're defending. And I want to go into this question and jump, because, for example, in Peru, people that are fighting to protect the ocean, they're called radical all the time, but we have a fishing industry right now that's proposing in the court to go fish inside MPAs. So they call people, scientists, anyone in the community that's doing work to protect the environment, they call them activists, just radical activists. But the fishing industry, for example, is doing activism, trying to fish inside the MPAs. They're doing activism, going and fighting and lobbying and creating policy for areas. The oil industry is doing the same thing. So what would you tell people? And I think a lot of adults have a negative connotation to activism. They say activism is not right, activism is not something that we do, but all the extractive industries do activism all the time. So what do you think about the word activism?
It's become a term that is used in a negative way. What's the alternative? You sit around and do nothing when you see your house is on fire? It's a term that has come about as the need has come about to do something about the rapid changes in the habitability of Earth. It's something that was not as obvious when I was a child, that is obvious to you, to everyone, that in some ways we have a better world than existed in the 20th century. In a lot of ways, we can communicate, new insight. We've learned more in the same period of time that we have lost more. It's like a race, in a way, when you think how much has been learned because we have the technology to go high in the sky, deep in the sea, to communicate information around the world instantaneously, to be able to connect the dots, to see patterns, to use the power of computers to look at connections, that we can begin to see those patterns in ways that our predecessors could not. And we're growing up, you are, armed with knowledge that what Earth looks like from high in the sky. You have knowledge that didn't exist when I was a child about what's in the ocean, because nobody knew. It wasn't because people didn't want to know. Nobody could know. We didn't have the capacity to go high in the sky or deep in the sea, or to tune in to what's happening on the other side of the planet at any point. We didn't know, could not measure the decline of polar ice. It was easy to be complacent when you didn't know, but you know. Everybody should know, and everyone should be as motivated as you are to take whatever action. Is that activism, taking action? Imagine if you didn't take action when you see that there's a real problem with the direction that the state of the world, the natural world that keeps us alive, we're on track to lose maybe 1 million species by the end of this century. We don't even know how many have already been lost through the destructive actions on the land as well as in the sea, or what the consequences to those gaps in the fabric of life mean to the security of Earth as a habitable planet. It's not just about carbon dioxide warming the planet. It's not just about the acidification of the ocean. You might know about the concept of planetary boundaries, of these measures of what keeps Earth in a safe space, in a universe. It's really not very friendly. I mean, we dream of setting up housekeeping on Mars, or maybe the moon, or maybe somewhere that out there beyond our own solar system. And I don't know, maybe someday it could happen, but not if we don't first keep ourselves safe here.
Thank you so much, Sylvia. And I think coming into that, you talked a lot around the planetary boundaries that are needed. And I think you might have seen that it was radical because basically ecological concepts in our planet are relatively new. I mean, the concept of extinction, for example, has around 200 years on the planet also. I remember reading about the first person that discovered the mammoth. They would share it around the naturalists and the scientists, and they would say, that's an animal that has to be around here. And that was 1783. They're like, there's an animal that has to be around here. No animal has ever disappeared or gone extinct. So ecological concepts like extinction are relatively new compared to ideologies and beliefs that have thousands and thousands of years on the planet. And I think we just started to understand planetary boundaries. We just started to understand how populations affected humans. And for example, we started to understand the concept of invasive species that affect biodiversity loss. We started to understand concepts like habitat loss. And I think even till today, we have a lot of concepts that we have not grasped yet ecologically. And I want to ask you this because 10,000 years ago, as humans, we reached the first 1 million persons. We were 1 million people for the first time. In 1471, we were 500 million people. Just 200 years ago, in 1801, we reached for the first billion people. And in just 200 years, we've reached 8 billion people. But now to talk about our population, it seemed radical. But I want to ask you, does population matter?
Of course it does. Our prosperity has come at the cost of everybody else. I mean, truly, look at about half of the land is occupied by agriculture, displacing how many other organisms, creatures that have no choices about where to live. We have taken and diverted fresh water for our purposes at the cost of those creatures who require that fresh water as much as we do. But we have arbitrarily, it would seem, from their point of view, just taken and diverted for our singular purposes. And, you know, it is only perhaps right about now, which is why being a 21st century human being is probably to be the luckiest human ever to have arrived in time, because we could not know the impact that we were having. Earth seemed, I mean, nature, we call nature natural resources, as if everything is there as a commodity for us to use, free goods to take, whether it's trees or air or water, birds, mammals, fish, squid, you name it. It's just, let's just take, and we've taken. And while our numbers have gone like this, everybody else, except for a few, I think cockroaches have probably prospered. Fleas, oh yeah. And rats, they love what humans have done. Houseflies, there are a number of species that say, go humans, go, because you've made Earth more habitable. We've increased their prosperity. Cows, I mean, if you just look how many cows there are, yes, we raise them so that we can eat them, consider how many cows there are today as compared to 1492, when you say that was about 500 million people.
Yeah.
And when I came on board, there were 2 billion people. I have personally witnessed, quadruple the number. Imagine if we had 4 times the number of people in this room, which is the direction we're going if we keep consuming nature, but maybe not. There are limits to how much nature can yield and still have a habitable planet. That's what the planetary boundaries concept is about. How much of nature can be converted? And it looks as though we've already gone over the line in some areas. And there's some areas that we don't even know because of the magnitude of what we still don't know about. I mean, this is the greatest era of discovery, of exploration, especially with the ocean. The deeper you go, the less you know, but the more new discoveries we're finding. That was the conclusion of the Census of Marine Life, the 10-year study that tried to figure out how many species live in the sea. And we're just beginning to grasp the magnitude of the diversity of life in the sea as compared to what's on the land. And what has already been lost since I began exploring the ocean. I don't think this is cause and effect. But since I began exploring the ocean, half the coral reefs are gone, 90% of the sharks. But I am a witness to this era of loss, of change in the ocean. And it's only like right about now that we're starting to not only notice, but realize if the ocean fails, we fail. The ocean governs climate. Even the scientists of the 1950s did not take the ocean into account, or the 60s or the 70s, or even right now. They're just beginning to incorporate the ocean as the principal driver of planetary temperature, of the habitability of the planet. The ocean is like 97% of the biosphere where life occurs. Because we're terrestrial, we have focused throughout all of our existence on that 3%, because that's where we live. But even there, consider how much we have converted of nature to support our prosperity. But it's only in the last half century or so that we have, in a sense, done to the ocean what it has taken us thousands of years to do to the land. Why or how? Because of the technology that has enabled us to scale up extraction of life, of minerals from the ocean, and to create this vast amount of trash, plastics and chemicals that we're putting into the ocean that is, again, scaled up dramatically since what they call the Anthropocene, 1950, the middle of the 20th century. My watch. I first put my face in the water with scuba in 1953. And since then, I've had thousands of hours exploring, living underwater, using submarines. And I feel in some ways like the astronaut who comes back and doesn't tell anybody what they see. I want everyone to see. I wish everyone could go. And some of you are going out there. You are beginning this great era of exploration, but we have to hurry. Time is of the essence in terms of taking the knowledge that now exists and converting it into the decisions, the choices we make about what do we do? How do we live? We can't go on at an industrial scale trying to feed people with wildlife, whether it's birds or elephants or tuna. These are all wild animals. We are beginning to understand the importance of rewilding the land. I mean, I'm so encouraged to see, fortunes being invested in planting trees. 1 trillion trees, what a good idea if they're the right trees in the right place at the right time. And restocking, restoring wild animals to the land. But we are subsidizing with billions of dollars the de-wilding of the ocean, the industrial extraction of wild animals from pole to pole, and now in the deep sea, and taking on deep sea mining because of the technology that did not exist when I was a child now is within our grasp. We have the power to kill, or we have the power to care. We have a choice. What is the future we want?
Thank you so much, Sylvia, and thank you for answering that question, which I think it's a very sensible topic also with our species, understanding and really grasping our concept that we are one more species here in this planet that's amplifying its distribution range. And even if we were to live in sustainable ways, we still have nutrient requirements that come basically from the land. We still need nutrients, we still need basic requirements, even if we live in the most sustainable way possible to sustain ourselves. So population, it's an important factor in that. And also in that, talking about the future, and you talked about geological eras, but I want to go a little bit smaller, like past a century, for example, when we talked about the whales. I mean, the whaling campaign to be able to stop the killing of whales was seen at the moment as something radical also. And many people who have been in the whaling commission tell us now the deep sea mining campaign, it's like what we were campaigning for the whales. Like at first everyone was like, no, and now everyone's like, oh, it makes sense. And now people come and they're saying we should also start looking at sharks and protecting sharks completely like we protect whales. And then we go to some places and they're like, oh no, we can still take hammerhead sharks and we can still take blue shark. People depend on it. But science should be the one leading. And Max always tells me, I don't know if Max is around here.
Max Biller, where are you?
I don't know where Max, there's Max. Max, he always says, like when we go to debate, space at tables, he's always like, what is the measure that's needed? What does science tells us we need? Because we go to some spaces and we're like, okay, so we need to really ban the shark population, the shark fishing here. And they're like, oh no, but that's not socially just for the community. So, they depend on sharks. But we're like, if you let them keep on killing the sharks, they're not gonna have shark populations and they're not gonna have a whole ecosystem in the future. So every time, Max is always like, focus for what's the measure that we need. And in Peru, for example, I think everyone went through the pandemic, right? When we were with the government and COVID happened and started to appear, the first thing that we did was consult scientists. It's like, what's going on? What's happening? And they're like, okay, we need lockdown and we need vaccines. Lockdown and vaccines, that's what science says we need. Let's go for that. And that's what we did. We did what science says we needed, and that's immediately we acted upon. Sadly, it aggravated poverty in some cases. It aggravated inequality in some cases. But if we did not go with these measures that were needed, deaths and suffering would have been worse at the end. And I think the same vision we need for the environment. For example, in climate change in Peru, we have a lot of measures that we need. But we've gone through processes of many years of consulting, participation, that's still not letting it happen because we don't get the approval of all the communities in the case. Or sometimes we have measures that science says we need, and they're like, oh, but that's not just, and we need to go just for just measures. And measures that are just, social justice, are the ones that we need. But Max told me the other day, he's like, what science says is we need, that's the just. That's what's socially just. Because at the end, if we don't implement this, what scientists tell us, more people are going to suffer in the long term. So now that we have such a big debate on social justice, We need to understand that social justice should come from science, specifically. And then we should adapt, because if we just keep on dilating processes, the suffering might be worse. So based on this, now and in the future, what do you think are the measures that countries now in our ocean need to commit? What are the measures that we need?
We need to abide by the precautionary principle, because we do not have all of the answers. What we do know, or should know, and should respect, is the magnitude of our ignorance. We should recognize that Earth is habitable not because of humans. It's because of 4.5 billion years of life acting on rocks and water. We could go back 1 billion years ago in a space, in a time machine, and we wouldn't recognize Earth. There'd be no trees, there'd be no birds, no squid to kill. We would have a hard time surviving, even on this water-blessed planet 1 billion years ago. It's taken a long time for Earth to become habitable, to have what we need and all the rest of life as it now exists needs. It's taken a really short period of time, mostly in my lifetime, and maybe 100 or so years more, as our technology became so sophisticated that we could do things that our predecessors could not, in terms of consuming nature on a scale that is unprecedented, which is why we have seen this growth, our ability to clear cut a forest, not with an axe that would take, months, years, but in hours. You can catch in the ocean with the nets, with the trawls, with navigation assistance, with satellites to find, with marketing to take what, on a scale that was not possible before refrigeration when I was a child. You just could not manage the tons of wild animals extracted from the ocean, because some during the 1700s and 1800s and into the early 1900s, salt was a way to preserve large quantities of fish. But until refrigeration came along in the middle of the 20th century, the amount that was taken was modest, because just couldn't handle it. Fish would rot before it ever got to market. And the marketplaces did not exist. It's connected. Look at today's ocean. 90% of just about everything that consumers consume globally, from shoelaces to, I don't know what, everything, glasses, food, furniture, energy, goes by sea. 90% of everything gets shipped across the ocean. It's changing the nature of the ocean, not just what we take out and ship around, but just the process of shipping has consequences that we're just beginning to face up to. What other things, like noise in the ocean, that we did not know could be a problem, will be a problem once we understand the impact. Deep sea mining, again, you hear people saying, it's just going to be a small part of the ocean. I can imagine those who have clear-cut rainforests. We're just going to take a little bit of the rainforest. Look at the world today. Where there's a market, or if there is not a market for something, markets are created. There was not a market for sharks back in the 1980s. They were called an underutilized species, unmarketable, until there was a campaign to consume them. and markets were created. Who ever heard of Patagonian toothfish until they began marketed as Chilean sea bass? Who, except for a few, consumed squid as calamari until there was a mechanized way to get so many squid from all over the world that a market was created for calamari. It's in restaurants all over the world, everywhere. It wasn't when I was a child. Squid were not turned into fertilizer or food for salmon, because salmon farming is a new phenomenon since the 1970s. I mean, the changes. So when I see the rapid shifts in the world in my lifetime, and imagine your lifetime ahead, what don't we know? What surprises are out there? What could we do to safeguard your future? Safeguard nature. Safeguard whatever you can. Your highest priority must be identifying those places that are still in pretty good shape, wherever they are, land or sea. Don't make further intrusions. Don't kill any more of these natural, the true legacy, that your inheritance, if you think of it selfishly, as just humans, but all of life on Earth. This is the library that is still as intact as it will ever be. We're losing books, we're losing knowledge every day that we go out and destroy another coral reef. And why would we even think of going into the deep sea where there's no going back? It's consumed forever. When we talk about building these systems over not just centuries or thousands or hundreds of thousands of years, millions of years. Humans have only been around more or less 1 million years. One more thing. I just came here from the Dominican Republic, where the president and ministers got together, and I was a witness to signing 30% plus a bit of their entire exclusive economic zone. Much of that is to safeguard Silver Banks, which some of you may recognize is just a celebrated place, not just among humans, but because humpback whales gather there. It's one of the principal areas where humpback whales get together and hoop it up and make more humpback whales. So it's kind of important to keep it safe if you're a humpback whale, or if you're humans who really like to see whales. And I just crunched a few numbers with this announcement and realized that the entire country, the Dominican Republic, has more people, 11 million, little m million, than all of the whales on Earth together. You take all of the humpback whales, they number in the thousands. The sperm whales, almost 1 million. The northern right whales, about 300. Go through the whole list. It doesn't add up to as many people as live in that small island country. There was a time when whales outnumbered us. But now, you think about, there are 8 billion, big billion of us. It's in our hands. Our decisions will determine not just their fate, but ours too. We have the best chance we will ever have right now, while we have as much of the natural systems in place and knowledge that enables us to restore, to some extent, kelp forests, coral reefs. But the best way forward is protect what you've got and then restore what you can. You remember the astronauts in Apollo 13, where their life support suddenly crashed, and they had to patch together with duct tape and ingenuity a system that would enable them to limp their way back to Earth. Well, there isn't enough duct tape on the planet to repair our life support system. It's in real trouble. But we still have a chance. We can still breathe. But on your watch, if there's as much damage done in the next 50 years as I have witnessed in the past 50, woe is us as a species. But you know, that's the key. Armed with knowledge, that's the superpower of the present generation. And activism, what's the alternative? It's just be careful not to exaggerate. You don't have to. Just tell the truth. The best knowledge that we've got. And if you find that, oh, what I thought was true isn't quite the way it was, then fix it. Celebrate the new knowledge that has been acquired. Nobody knows what all of the truth of the universe is. We could just keep asking questions. And don't be afraid to ask. And don't be afraid to be the first to do something.
Thank you so much, Sylvia. You have given us a lot of inspiration. Before we go, I want to ask you, here you have a lot of young people that are super powerful, like you mentioned. And today, like you mentioned, we're still breathing, and I think we take breathing as an advantage. But because 200 million years ago, have you guys heard about the Permian extinction? One of the greatest extinctions that we had 200 million years ago was basically because some microorganisms, because of a change of chemistry in the ocean, changed their way of producing and liberating oxygen and started liberating toxic sulfides into the air. So it became a toxic atmosphere, and over 95% of all species on the planet went to extinction 200 million years ago because of a change of chemistry in the ocean. So right now we're taking breathing for granted, I think. Like
Precautionary principle.
Precautionary principle in that way, completely. So what do you think we need to tackle and should be the fights that we young people take in the future? Okay, deep sea mining, we should definitely go for a moratorium or a ban. What do you think on that?
Do what is possible to safeguard the systems that are intact. If it's not broken, don't fix it.
Exactly.
Don't try to improve on it. We use these terms like we're developing the marsh. That doesn't mean that you're making things better.
Yeah.
In the global sense. It means you're making it better for human use. Quotes, developing it. You're putting a parking lot there instead of marsh.
Yeah. We don't need deep sea mining.
We don't need deep sea mining, so why would we even think of tearing up the ocean floor when there are better alternatives, certainly more cost-effective alternatives to achieving the desired goals?
And also, thank you, Sylvia. And now that's some deep sea mining. On sharks, all of our countries, should we look for a ban on shark fishing?
I think we have an opportunity to say, look what we did with whales. It's a number of different species across the board. There's an international moratorium. It took a while. I served on the International Whaling Commission for 4 years before that last little stretch. Before in 1986, through international accord, most nations, not all, but most, say we're going to no longer commercially kill whales. We still kill whales by taking their food. We kill them with plastic. We kill them with entanglement. But amazingly, just because we stopped deliberately killing them and marketing them, their numbers are going like this. There's a change in attitude about turtles. You know, there are 8 or so different kinds of sea turtles. They have not been, by international agreement, totally protected. But regionally, there's a shift in the way people generally regard sea turtles. People love sea turtles, and I don't mean turtle soup. They used to love turtles that way, but now there's this change. Their numbers are significantly increasing. They're not what they used to be, but they're better than when I was a child. So we know it works when you stop the killing and start the caring. Imagine if we just said, sharks are sacred, the way people in Hawaii have for generations regarded sharks as sacred. And other parts of Polynesia, they're not killed for soup or fins or anything else. They're respected as these majestic creatures. In some, it's even a part of their heritage, their religious beliefs. So it's time. It's overdue. We just need to stop killing them. Nobody needs to kill a shark unless there's a shark about to eat you, and that doesn't happen very often.
Thank you so much, Sylvia. I know there's a lot of more species. We should talk about like tuna that you've talked so much about protecting
Why
the
are
tuna.
we eating tuna? Come on.
So we should stop eating tuna. And I know you have so much more fights. So
Why are we eating squid?
or even squid.
Octopus.
Yes, why? So thank you so much, Sylvia. I know we ran out of time, and they're telling me we ran out of time. So I just want to thank you, and I want to invite everyone to keep on reading Sylvia's publications, his books, because I think that's one of the mentors that we need to focus on, seeing for the future and what we need. And before I go, I want to share something that Sylvia told me in the bag. She said, we may seem radical today, but it's just because we're advanced, we're ahead of our times. We're visionaries. That's why we are seen radical today. So thank you so much, Sylvia.
Thank you.
And big clap again for Sylvia Earle.
Okay, everybody. We still have some more programming for you.